The job interview in Chicago was a big deal for me, a potential turning point in my career. I arrived a day early to give myself time to relax and prepare. The hotel I chose was modern, with sleek designs and lots of glass and chrome. It wasn't luxurious, but it looked clean and professional. I booked a room on the 7th floor, grateful for the peace and quiet the higher levels usually provided. When I checked in, the woman at the front desk seemed preoccupied, her eyes darting between me and her computer screen. She hesitated for a moment before handing over my key card and muttered something about renovations. I didn't think much of it until I got off the elevator and stepped into the 7th floor hallway. It was dimly lit, with a faint smell of paint lingering in the air. Some of the doors had plastic sheets draped over them, with signs that read, "Under maintenance." My room was at the far end of the corridor, directly across from one of these taped-off doors. The number on it was missing, and the handle was bound with thick masking tape. When I entered my room, it was as expected. Clean, functional, and unremarkable. A king-sized bed sat in the center, with a small desk and a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. I opened the curtains to take in the city view, though it was mostly rooftops and HVAC units. After unpacking, I settled in to review my notes for the interview. A few hours later, I heard the sound of movement in the hallway, faint but distinct. It sounded like someone dragging something heavy. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 11 p.m. Assuming it was part of the renovations, I tried to ignore it, but the noise persisted, a rhythmic shuffle that stopped and started in intervals. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the door to peek outside. The hallway was empty, except for the taped-up door across from mine. The sound had stopped, and I stood there for a moment, wondering if I had imagined it. The next morning, I had an early start. As I left my room, I noticed the taped-up door again. Something about it unsettled me. The tape looked looser than it had the night before, as though someone had tried to peel it off. I hurried past it, pushing the thought aside, and went to my interview. The day went well, and I returned to the hotel feeling optimistic. It was late afternoon, and the hallway was eerily silent as I stepped out of the elevator. As I walked toward my room, I noticed a cleaning cart parked near the taped-up door. The housekeeper was standing beside it, staring at the door with a peculiar expression. I asked her if everything was all right. She flinched, as though I had startled her, and muttered that the room was off-limits. When I asked why, she simply shook her head and wheeled her cart away without another word. That night, I tried to focus on getting some rest, but the hallway felt different. The usual background noises of a hotel, muffled conversations, doors opening and closing, were absent. It was too quiet. Around midnight, I heard a faint noise again. This time it was a soft thud, followed by what sounded like shuffling feet. It seemed to come from the taped-up door. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and debated whether to investigate. Eventually, curiosity won. I stepped into the hallway, the soft carpet muffling my footsteps. The door across from mine looked the same, but as I got closer, I noticed something odd. The masking tape around the handle had been torn slightly, and the edge of the plastic sheet covering the door was crumpled. I pressed my ear against the door and held my breath. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, I heard a faint sound, like someone breathing. I stumbled back, my pulse racing, and hurried back into my room, locking the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, listening for more sounds, but the hallway remained silent. The next morning, as I checked out, I couldn't resist asking the front desk clerk about the room across from mine. She hesitated, her friendly demeanor faltering, and said it was part of the renovations. When I pressed further, she looked uncomfortable and said that the room was currently sealed off for safety reasons. Her vague response only fueled my unease. I left the hotel and drove home, unable to shake the feeling that something about that room wasn't right. Months later, I looked up the hotel online out of curiosity. There were no reviews mentioning renovations, but a few mentioned weird vibes on the 7th floor. To this day, I can't explain what I heard or why that room was taped shut. All I know is that I'll think twice before booking a hotel without reading the reviews first. I didn't believe the stories about strange happenings at hotels until I stayed at the Hotel Victoria in northern Maine. It was a beautiful, old-fashioned building with a grand staircase in the lobby, intricate woodwork, and that faint, musty smell of aged carpet. I had driven there for a business meeting, opting to stay overnight since it was a long drive home. When I arrived, the front desk clerk greeted me warmly and handed me my room key. A real key, not a card. The keychain bore the number 412. I made a joke about how rare physical keys were these days, but the clerk didn't laugh. Instead, she simply said the hotel liked to keep things traditional. As I made my way up to the 4th floor, the hallways grew eerily quiet. The ornate carpeting muffled my footsteps, and every now and then, the old walls emitted a faint creak. My room was at the end of the corridor. As I unlocked the door, I felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I brushed it off as travel fatigue. The room was cozy but outdated, with a heavy 4-poster bed, floral wallpaper, and a small desk by the window. The radiator hissed faintly, adding to the room's aged charm. I unpacked my suitcase and decided to freshen up before heading down for dinner. In the bathroom, I noticed the mirror was slightly cracked along the edge. It wasn't enough to distort the reflection, but it gave the room an odd, fragmented feel. I washed my hands, and as I looked up, I thought I saw something shift in the reflection. It was quick, just a shadow in the corner of the room. When I turned, there was nothing there. That night, I attended the meeting and had dinner with a few colleagues. It was close to midnight by the time I returned to my room. The hallway was utterly silent, and the lights seemed dimmer than before. As I reached my door, I thought I heard faint shuffling behind me, but when I turned around, the hallway was empty. Inside the room, I locked the door and secured the deadbolt. I wasn't scared, not exactly, but something about the silence felt oppressive. I decided to read for a while before bed. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by the sound of knocking. It wasn't loud, more like a soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap on the door. I lay frozen for a moment, listening. When the tapping stopped, I got up to check the peephole. No one was there. I told myself it was probably a guest who had mistaken my room for theirs. I returned to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every now and then, I heard faint sounds, footsteps, a door creaking open somewhere, the faint hum of distant voices. The next morning, I mentioned the noises to the front desk clerk as I checked out. She looked surprised and assured me that I was the only guest on the 4th floor that night. When I got home, I did some research on the hotel. Apparently, it had a history of unexplained incidents. Guests hearing strange noises, seeing shadows, and even reporting objects moving on their own. I tried to convince myself it was all just my imagination, but part of me still wonders. Was it? It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway, a chance to unplug and get some peace after months of back-to-back projects. The hotel was a boutique spot just outside of Asheville, tucked away in the mountains. The reviews were glowing. Friendly staff, excellent food, and serene surroundings. When I arrived, the place looked just as charming as the photos online. The lobby had a rustic modern feel, with reclaimed wood beams, cozy armchairs, and a stone fireplace. At check-in, the clerk, a young man with curly hair and an easy smile, gave me a warm welcome and handed me my key card. My room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the back garden. The first night was uneventful. I had dinner in the hotel's small restaurant, read for a while in my room, and went to bed early. I woke up feeling refreshed and decided to spend the morning exploring the hiking trails nearby. When I returned around midday, I passed by the room next to mine, room 213. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe housekeeping was inside or someone had forgotten to close it properly. But as I walked by, I realized the room was dark, and there was no sound coming from within. Felt strange to leave it like that, so I knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Hello? Is anyone there?" No response. I pushed the door open a little further and peered inside. The room was empty. The bed was unmade, and a half-packed suitcase sat open on the floor. On the nightstand was a phone charger and a pair of glasses, as though the guest had stepped out briefly. I closed the door gently and headed downstairs to let the front desk know. The same clerk from the day before was working, and I told him about the open door. He looked puzzled and glanced at his computer. "That's strange," he said. 213 checked out this morning." I frowned and told him about the belongings I'd seen. He seemed genuinely confused and promised to send someone up to check. Satisfied, I went back to my room to shower and relax. By evening, I had nearly forgotten about the incident, until I noticed the door to room 213 was ajar again. This time, the hallway was quiet, with no sign of housekeeping or any other guests. I hesitated but eventually peeked inside. The room looked the same as before, except for one small difference. The suitcase was gone. The bed was still unmade, and the glasses and charger were still on the nightstand. My stomach tightened. It didn't make sense. I went back to the front desk, and this time the clerk's friendly demeanor was replaced with a hint of irritation. He assured me they had sent someone to clean the room earlier, and it should be locked now. When I insisted it wasn't, he promised to look into it and thanked me for letting him know. That night I struggled to fall asleep. Something about the situation gnawed at me. Around 1 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. They were slow, deliberate, and stopped just outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for them to continue, but the silence stretched on. Summoning my courage, I got out of bed and tiptoed to the peephole. The hallway was empty. The next morning, I went downstairs for breakfast. The clerk from the previous days wasn't there. Instead, an older woman with a no-nonsense attitude was manning the desk. I decided to ask her about room 213. She frowned and said, "We haven't had a guest in 213 for the past few weeks. That room's been out of service for maintenance." I stared at her, confused. I told her about the open door, the belongings I'd seen, and the clerk's assurance that someone had checked out. She looked concerned and checked the computer, but insisted that no one had been assigned to that room. By then, I felt a creeping unease that I couldn't shake. After breakfast, I decided to cut my trip short and check out a day early. As I packed, I heard faint sounds through the wall shared with room 213. A soft scraping, like furniture being moved. I left without telling anyone. A week later, my curiosity got the better of me, and I called the hotel, asking about the clerk I'd spoken to. The woman on the phone paused before saying, "We don't have anyone by that name working here." The logical part of me tells me there's an explanation: miscommunication, human error, something mundane. But part of me wonders what was really going on in room 213.